Officer Mark Talbot had always believed he was prepared for any kind of pain. He had handled shootings, domestic calls, drug busts gone wrong. He had zipped up body bags, comforted sobbing families, and walked into scenes so horrific they stayed with him in nightmares. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the moment he walked into the emergency vet clinic and saw his K-9 partner, Ranger, lying motionless on the steel table. Ranger wasn't just a police dog. He was the partner who had pulled Mark out from behind a crashed patrol car during a shootout. He was the dog whose bark alone had stopped 3 home invasions. He was the gentle giant who slept beside Mark's 8-year-old daughter, Lily, whenever thunderstorms rattled their windows. Ranger was family. But now the mighty German shepherd lay trembling in shallow, uneven breaths, his once bright amber eyes dull and drifting unfocused. His chest rose in painful, stuttering lifts, and each exhale came out as a low, pitiful whine that made Mark's throat tighten. Lily sat beside Ranger's head, small legs folded under her, one hand stroking the dog's ear as if scared to let go. Her brown hair fell in messy curls across her cheeks, damp from crying. She whispered into Ranger's fur, her voice cracking every few seconds. "It's okay, boy, I'm right here. Please don't go. You promised you'd always protect me." Her words stabbed Mark straight through the ribs. He had brought her because she refused to stay home, because Ranger had been hers almost as much as he'd been his. From the moment Ranger joined the unit, Lily had claimed him as her hero, and Ranger had lived up to it every single day. Dr. Bennett stepped back from the monitor with a grim expression. He was a calm man in his late 40s, steady hands, slow voice, eyes that had seen too many last moments. "Officer Talbot," he began softly, lowering his glasses. "His body is shutting down. Whatever toxin he encountered is progressing faster than anything I've dealt with." "Toxin?" Mark snapped his head up. "What toxin? He was fine 2 nights ago." Dr. Bennett exhaled heavily. "I'm sorry. The symptoms, neurological tremors, heart irregularities, respiratory collapse, these are consistent with exposure to something harmful, something potent." Mark's stomach plummeted. 1,000 questions collided in his mind. When had Ranger been exposed? Was this an accident, something environmental, or had someone done this? Ranger shifted slightly, stretching his muzzle toward Lily as if trying to breathe her in. His weak tail thumped once against the metal table. Lily leaned down and hugged him gently, pressing her cheek to his. "I love you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'll be brave for you." Mark swallowed hard, forcing down the wave of agony threatening to break. He looked at Dr. Bennett. Is there anything left to try?" The vet hesitated, which told Mark everything. "We've administered antitoxins, fluids, cardiac stabilizers," Bennett said slowly. "He isn't responding. His heart is failing. We're reaching the point where letting him go might be the humane choice." Lily froze. "No," she whispered. "No," Mark echoed, but it came out hollow. Dr. Bennett signaled to his technician. She prepared the syringe, the final injection. The room grew unbearably quiet. Lily let out a soft sob and kissed Ranger's forehead. Mark placed his hand on Ranger's side, feeling the faint, irregular thump beneath his palm. Ranger gave one last shudder of breath. Then something unbelievable happened. Ranger pushed upward. Not much, just inches, but enough to lift his head, enough to shift his paw, enough to wrap his trembling body around Lily in a weak but deliberate embrace. The monitor behind him suddenly beeped in a jagged pattern. Dr. Bennett froze. "Wait, hold on." The technician stopped mid-step. Mark jerked his head toward the screen. Ranger's vitals, seconds from crashing, had spiked upward in bizarre, uneven leaps. His pulse tripled, then dipped, then surged again. "That's not normal," Bennett whispered, stepping closer with wide eyes. That's impossible." Mark stared at him. "What does it mean?" The vet lined in, studying the readings with growing alarm. "It means," he murmured, voice tight, "something is very wrong, and not in the way we thought." And before Mark could ask anything else, the monitor let out a single sharp tone, not a flat line, but an alert, a warning. Something inside Ranger's body was reacting. To something none of them could see. Mark's hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. He could barely breathe as Dr. Bennett leaned over Ranger, eyes scanning the monitor with a mixture of disbelief and fear. The vitals were bouncing in patterns that didn't make sense, heart rate surging and dipping in rapid bursts, oxygen levels spiking then falling, a rhythm that seemed almost reactive. Ranger's gaze, though hazy, was locked on Lily, as if he were drawing strength from her alone. Dr. Bennett swallowed hard. "This isn't ordinary poisoning," he said, voice low but tense. "Whatever's in his system is responding to her presence." Mark's heart skipped a beat. "Responding to her," he repeated, incredulous. How is that even possible? The vet shook his head, adjusting Ranger's IV line. I don't know, but if we proceed with the injection, we could kill him unnecessarily. There's a chance his body is fighting it on its own. Lily clutched Ranger's fur tighter, tears streaking down her cheeks. He's my best friend, she whispered, trembling. You can't take him away. Mark's chest ached and he knelt down to press his forehead to hers. I know, baby, I know, he murmured. He had already called in every favor he could think of, his K9 unit partners, the lab techs, anyone who might explain this. Ranger had been his partner in life-and-death situations for years, and now the dog, his friend, his protector, was clinging to the last sliver of life in a desperate embrace with his daughter. Dr. Bennett motioned for Mark to step aside. He grabbed a swab, moving quickly to take samples from Ranger's bloodstream. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with before we do anything irreversible. Mark paced, glancing between Lily and Ranger. His mind raced back to the night before. Ranger had gone on his last patrol alone, tracking a suspect through the outskirts of town. A call had come in, a burglary in progress. Ranger had disappeared into an abandoned warehouse, his bark echoing in the darkness. By the time backup arrived, the suspect had fled, and Ranger was limping slightly, shaking, but otherwise okay. Until now. Dr. Bennett turned back to Mark, his expression darkening. This isn't natural. His vitals aren't just erratic, they're manipulated. I've never seen anything like this. Whoever did this didn't just want to hurt him, they wanted control. Mark's stomach dropped. Control? You mean someone targeted him? The vet's eyes met his. I'm afraid so, and it's sophisticated. This isn't a chemical you find at the corner store. This is something designed to be lethal if mismanaged. Mark felt a cold fury creeping in. Someone had deliberately put his partner's life in jeopardy. Someone had wanted to break him. And worse, now Lily was right there, holding Ranger's head against her chest, unaware of the silent danger hovering in the room. Ranger whined, his weak body trembling against her, and then something happened that made everyone freeze. The monitor beeped sharply. Ranger's pupils dilated, ears twitched, and his tail lifted slightly, not much, but a movement of awareness. He shifted his head toward a corner of the room, toward the vent above the door, and growled, low, threatening. Mark's eyes followed Ranger's gaze. Nothing moved, and yet the hair on his neck stood up. Ranger's growl deepened. Lily looked up at him, frightened. What is it, boy? Mark whispered. Dr. Bennett leaned closer, voice tight. He's sensing something or someone. I can't explain it, but whatever it is, it's here. Suddenly the door handle rattled, not violently, just enough to catch everyone's attention. Ranger's growl turned into a sharp bark, and he lunged slightly in the direction of the door. Mark's heart pounded. He glanced at Lily, who squeezed Ranger's ears and whispered, Don't let them take me, Ranger. And then, just as Dr. Bennett started to reach for the phone to call security, the vent above the door shifted slightly, a shadow sliding across it. Ranger's ears perked, teeth bared, and his body tensed like a spring. Mark's stomach dropped as realization hit him. Whoever had poisoned Ranger was not done yet. And from the vent, a quiet, deliberate voice whispered, No, he's alive. Mark's blood ran cold. The voice was faint, almost a whisper, yet every syllable hit like a punch to his chest. He instinctively pushed Lily behind him, shielding her as Ranger's low growl reverberated through the small clinic room. The dog's body, though weak and trembling, coiled like a spring, ready to lunge. Mark's eyes darted to the vent, scanning for any sign of movement, any shadow that could give away the intruder. Nothing, but the hairs on the back of his neck refused to settle. Dr. Bennett's hands trembled slightly as he held the phone, fingers hovering over the speed dial for security. Who could even know he's here? He whispered, eyes darting between Mark and the vent. This was supposed to be a private emergency. No one knew Ranger was coming in. Mark clenched his jaw, rage bubbling beneath the surface. He replayed every memory from the previous night, Ranger chasing the suspect into the abandoned warehouse, the strange chemical smell, the man's panicked shout as Ranger cornered him. It hadn't seemed like much at the time, a routine chase, nothing more, but now it was clear. Someone had tracked Ranger, or worse, tracked them. And they weren't just after the dog, they were after him, his family. Lily's small hand rested on Ranger's back and he shifted slightly, nuzzling her shoulder, alert but calm. The sight made Mark's chest ache with both pride and terror. He swallowed hard. Stay behind me, Lily, don't move. The vent rattled again, faint but deliberate. Ranger's ears twitched and he emitted a low growl, warning the intruder. Dr. Bennett's face turned pale. This is advanced, he muttered. Whatever was in Ranger's system, it's not just a poison. It's a neurotoxin designed to manipulate his body, but it's reactive, almost like it can sense proximity. Mark's eyes narrowed, so whoever did this planned for him to react. Yes, the vet said quietly. They wanted control, they wanted fear, and now they know he's alive and they're testing him. Suddenly, Ranger's low growl became a bark, sharp and commanding. Mark followed the dog's gaze to the floor beneath the vent. There, barely visible, was a tiny metallic glint, a device no larger than a coin, but unmistakably foreign. Ranger's teeth clicked together near it, and he barked again as if to say, "Do not touch." Mark's heart raced. He crouched beside Ranger, inspecting the device without touching it. His pulse thumped violently against his chest. He knew immediately what it was, a micro-tracker used by high-level criminal networks. He had seen similar devices in federal briefings, used for surveillance, tracking, and sometimes worse. Whoever had planted it wanted to monitor Ranger's movements, predict their actions, maybe even control the dog remotely. Lily looked up at Mark, eyes wide and frightened. "Daddy, what's happening?" Mark forced a calm he didn't feel. "They're just watching us, baby, but Ranger's smart. He won't let them win." Dr. Bennett stepped closer, voice shaking. "Mark, if we don't remove this, it could destabilize him again. He's weak already. One wrong step," and his words trailed off, but the implication was clear. Ranger could die at any moment. Mark nodded, grim determination settling over him. "Then we remove it, now." Before they could act, the lights flickered violently. The monitor above Ranger's head beeped rapidly, alarms shrieking. Ranger yelped, jerking against his restraints, eyes darting toward the door. Then, from somewhere outside, came a loud metallic click, the sound of a lock being tampered with. Mark's pulse hammered in his ears. He gripped Lily tightly, his body tense, every muscle ready. Ranger's growl rose, low and guttural, filling the room with a warning that Mark felt deep in his bones. And then, just as the shadows of the door shifted, a voice hissed from the hallway. "Step away from the dog, or she dies." Mark froze, every instinct screaming danger. Lily whimpered behind him. Ranger's teeth bared, but his body shook violently, barely holding himself upright. Mark knew with a sinking certainty that this was no ordinary threat. Whoever had tried to kill Ranger once had come back for round two. And this time they weren't bluffing. Mark's heart pounded so violently he could barely hear over the alarms. He crouched in front of Lily, shielding her with his body while Ranger trembled but remained alert, growling toward the vent in the darkened hallway. The micro-tracker glinted in the harsh overhead lights, a cold reminder that someone had orchestrated this nightmare. Whoever it was, they weren't just targeting a dog, they were sending a message, and now Mark knew the message included his daughter. Dr. Bennett's hands shook as he stepped closer to Ranger's table. "We need to remove this device immediately. I've seen similar tech in criminal labs. One wrong move could trigger a neurospike, and he could die instantly." Mark nodded sharply. "Do it, I don't care what it takes." His eyes flicked to the door, where the shadows seemed to writhe unnaturally in the dim light. Every instinct screamed danger. Someone was out there, watching, waiting for a mistake. As Dr. Bennett and his team worked, Ranger's muscles tensed under sedation, his body reacting instinctively to the danger Mark felt radiating from the hallway. Lily leaned closer, whispering, "I'll help him, Daddy. I won't let him go." Her small hand brushed Ranger's trembling fur, and for a moment his tail gave a weak wag, as if drawing strength from her courage. Mark swallowed hard, fighting the bile rising in his throat. He had faced criminals before, but this was different. This was intimate, personal. Whoever had done this knew his routines, his family, his dog. They had invaded their sanctuary and turned it into a trap. The vet's assistant handed Dr. Bennett a set of precision tools. "Ready?" he asked, voice tight. Dr. Bennett nodded, eyes locked on the device embedded near Ranger's spine. "We go slow. He's strong even like this. One sudden move, one jolt, and it could trigger anything." Mark held Lily close, whispering calming words, even as the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Ranger growled low, a sound of warning and defiance. He had survived the first attack, and now he was bracing for the second, even while his body betrayed him. Suddenly the vent rattled violently, dust and debris rained down. Ranger barked sharply, teeth flashing, as the door handle twisted, locks clicking. Someone was forcing their way in. Mark's pulse skyrocketed. "They're coming," he muttered. His hand went instinctively to his service pistol, but the room was crowded and Lily's safety was paramount. Ranger lunged weakly toward the door, growling like a living weapon despite his frailty. Dr. Bennett's hands froze mid-motion, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mark, if they get in, Ranger, he's still too weak. He might not survive a fight." Mark's jaw clenched. "I know, but I'm not letting them take him or her." He nodded toward Lily, whose tiny frame quivered but remained brave, clutching Ranger's neck like her lifeline. A shadow appeared in the doorway, then another. Movement, a flash of black, glint of metal. Someone was slipping inside, precise, deliberate. Ranger barked, his weak body trembling violently, yet he stood his ground, teeth bared, a living shield for the girl. Mark raised his pistol and fired a warning shot. The sound echoed like a cannon, reverberating through the walls. The intruders paused, reassessing. Then a voice hissed from the darkness, "Don't make a sound or she dies." Lily whimpered, clinging to Ranger, who stiffened, his amber eyes glinting with fierce determination. The micro-tracker suddenly beeped, an ominous tone like a countdown. Dr. Bennett froze, staring at the tiny device in disbelief. "It's rigged," he whispered. "They've set it to react if he moves or if anyone interferes." Mark felt the world tighten around him, the smell of fear, the tension in the air, the metallic threat against Ranger's spine. Every second stretched like an eternity. Ranger let out a low, guttural growl, inching toward the shadows with Lily's hand pressed to his neck, ready to defend her to the very end. Mark's pulse thundered in his ears. He whispered, almost to himself, "We're not losing him, not tonight." And then, just as Ranger's teeth snapped at the first intruder's shadow, the lights went out completely, plunging the room into suffocating darkness. The only sounds were the ragged breathing of a little girl, the whimpering growls of a wounded hero, and the soft, deliberate footsteps closing in. Mark's mind screamed in terror. They were inside. The darkness swallowed the clinic room, broken only by the harsh glow of the monitor over Ranger's table. Its beeps were erratic, unpredictable, a warning in rhythm with Ranger's own tense body. Mark's pulse pounded as he crouched over Lily, holding her tight. The little girl's tiny hands gripped his jacket, her nails digging in, eyes wide with fear. Ranger growled low, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the concrete walls, ears pinned back but alert. Despite the sedation and the neurotoxin coursing through his system, he had survived, and now he stood as the first and only line of defense. Dr. Bennett whispered urgently, "Mark that tracker, it's not just for monitoring. Whoever planted it, it can trigger his nervous system remotely. They could kill him instantly if they wanted." Mark's jaw tightened, anger and fear colliding. "Then we take it out, now." He gestured toward the tray of surgical tools, but before Dr. Bennett could respond, a shadow flickered across the doorway. From the hall, a metallic click echoed, followed by a soft, deliberate scraping sound. Someone was approaching, moving with the practiced precision of trained criminals. Mark's stomach dropped. They weren't just intruders, they were hunters. Ranger stiffened, muscles taut despite weakness. His hackles rose, his ears pricked, and he let out a guttural snarl. Lily pressed herself against his side. "Daddy, he's scared," she whispered, tiny voice trembling. Mark swallowed hard. "I know, baby, I know." He scanned the room. The surgical tools, the monitors, the heavy steel table, they were all potential hazards, but also weapons if they needed them. A faint whisper floated through the darkness, chilling in its calmness. "Step away from the dog or she dies." Mark's blood ran cold. He scanned the room for any clue, any glint of a weapon. Ranger's eyes, amber and glowing faintly in the monitor's light, locked onto the source. The dog's body tensed like a spring, ready to defend. Dr. Bennett stepped forward, voice low but firm. "Mark, we can't just wait. We need to remove it before they can interfere." Mark nodded. "Do it, go." His eyes never left the shadows. Ranger whined low, chest pressing against Lily as if to warn her to stay calm. Dr. Bennett and his assistant moved quickly, hands steady despite the tension in the room. The micro-tracker gleamed in the dim light as the vet carefully pried it from Ranger's spine. Ranger whimpered, muscles twitching violently, but remained conscious, aware, protective. Then a soft sound of shuffling feet. The intruders had moved closer. Mark turned, gun raised, heart hammering. Through the flickering shadows, he glimpsed a figure at the edge of the doorway, hands glinting with metal. Mark fired a warning shot. The bullet ricocheted off the wall, sending a shower of sparks into the dark. Ranger barked sharply, yelping despite his weakness, then lunged toward the shadow, teeth bared. The intruder recoiled, swearing under his breath. Mark caught a glint of a symbol stamped on the metal device in the intruder's hand, an insignia he recognized instantly from federal briefings, connected to a violent drug ring operating in the area. The same ring Ranger had helped dismantle months ago. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't forgiven. Mark's chest tightened. "They're here for him and for us," he whispered. "They won't stop until Ranger's gone or worse." Ranger, sensing the threat, forced himself upright despite trembling legs and a racing heart. Lily clutched his neck, whispering, "I've got you, boy, I've got you." Dr. Bennett froze mid-motion, realizing something critical. Mark, the device, it wasn't just tracking him. Whoever planted it, it could have been armed to explode if Ranger moved too much. Mark's stomach dropped, rage and fear coiling in his chest. They had survived the toxin, the sickness, but now the danger had escalated to something even deadlier. From the doorway, the intruders stepped forward, their silhouettes filling the room. Ranger's eyes glinted with defiance, lips curled in a snarl, tail rigid. Mark whispered to Lily, "Hold him close. Whatever happens, don't let go." And then a sound that made every nerve in Mark's body freeze. The faint beep of the micro-tracker, now lying on the tray, flashing red. The intruders knew it had been removed. And suddenly the lead man's voice cut through the darkness, low and menacing. "Thought you could hide him from us, think again." Ranger growled, trembling but ready. Mark raised his gun, Lily pressed against him, and the room tensed like a coiled spring. Something was about to happen. And in that instant, the clinic doors burst open. The clinic doors slammed open with a deafening crash, rattling the walls and sending dust and papers flying. Ranger's growl erupted into a sharp, commanding bark, though his legs trembled under him. He lunged forward, straining against the restraints, eyes locked on the intruders. Every muscle in his body was taut with instinctive fury, yet weakness clung to him like a shadow. Mark pressed Lily behind him, chest tight with fear and adrenaline. "Stay down, stay behind me," he shouted, pistol raised, scanning the darkened room. The intruders moved with military precision, stepping carefully over overturned chairs and scattered surgical tools. Dr. Bennett backed away, voice trembling. "Mark, they're professionals. If they're willing to poison a police dog, what do you think they'll do to us?" Mark's jaw clenched, "Then we make sure they don't get the chance." His eyes flicked to Ranger, whose low growl vibrated through the concrete floor. Despite his frailty, Ranger's stance was defiant. He was wounded, poisoned, nearly broken, but he refused to surrender. The lead intruder stepped forward, glinting in the flickering light, a thin knife in one hand, a small device in the other. The symbol Mark recognized from federal files, an insignia of a violent drug ring, the same men Ranger had helped put behind bars months ago. Their eyes were cold, calculating. "They're desperate," Mark muttered under his breath, "and they're dangerous." Ranger barked again, a low, guttural sound that seemed almost human in its intensity. Lily whimpered but stayed close, pressing her cheek against his fur. "I've got you, Ranger," she whispered, her tiny voice fierce despite fear. The intruder hissed, waving the device threateningly. "Step back from the dog. One wrong move and the toxin inside him will react, or maybe we'll just finish what we started." Mark's pulse hammered. He glanced at the micro-tracker lying on the tray. It had been removed, but had they armed a secondary mechanism? One wrong move and Ranger could die instantly. Ranger's ears twitched. He sensed the danger, the intent, the poison lingering in his body, and the desperation in the intruder's voice. Weak as he was, he pushed himself upright, muscles trembling violently, growling louder, teeth bared. He had survived the initial attack. He wasn't going to survive a second without fighting. Suddenly, the shadow of a second intruder moved near the surgical tray, aiming for the micro-tracker. Ranger lunged, weak but determined, snapping at the man's hand. The attacker cursed, stumbling back, barely avoiding the dog's teeth. Mark seized the moment, shouting, "Get out, now!" He raised his pistol, firing 2 warning shots toward the intruders. The sound echoed through the clinic like cannon fire. But the lead intruder laughed, a chilling, high-pitched sound. "You think 2 bullets will stop us? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Mark's stomach dropped. They weren't just after Ranger, they wanted him too. They knew his routines, his weaknesses. They had tracked him, manipulated him, and now they were here to finish the job. Ranger's body shook violently, chest heaving, yet he pressed closer to Lily, protective, defiant. He had survived poison, disease, and betrayal. Now he was facing raw human evil, and he would not falter. Dr. Bennett's voice cut through the chaos. "Mark, we need to act. We can stabilize him now before they reach him." Mark's eyes scanned the intruders' positions. One step closer, and Lily or Ranger could be fatally harmed. One miscalculation, and all would be lost. Then from the back of the room, a faint wail of sirens began to pierce the chaos. Backup had arrived. The intruders froze, momentarily distracted. Ranger seized the opportunity, lunging forward, teeth flashing, growling like a storm breaking in the clinic. The lead intruder swore, stepping back toward the doorway, his grip tightening on the device. Mark grabbed Lily, pressed her behind a table, and whispered, "Hold on, he's going to get us through this." But the intruder wasn't done. With a swift, deliberate motion, he pressed a button on the device, sending a faint beep that made every nerve in Mark's body snap. Ranger stiffened, trembling violently, growl turning into a yelp of pain. Mark's blood ran cold. The intruder smirked. "Thought you could hide him from us." Ranger whimpered but refused to collapse. Lily held tighter, whispering, "Stay with me, Ranger, please stay with me." And in that moment the sirens outside grew louder, voices calling commands. Help was arriving. But would it be in time? Because the intruder pressed the button again and Ranger's body convulsed violently. The convulsions rattled Ranger like a storm raging through his frail body. His legs buckled, yet he refused to lie down completely, chest pressed against Lily's small frame. Her hands clutched his fur tightly, whispering, "Stay with me, stay with me." Her voice, fragile yet determined, seemed to fuel something deep within him. The dog's amber eyes flickered with the spark of defiance, a silent promise that he wouldn't let her go. Mark's heart pounded like a drum in his chest. He gritted his teeth, gripping his pistol tightly, scanning the intruders. The lead man's smirk had hardened into a snarl. He pressed the button again, and the device beeped ominously. Ranger trembled violently, body jerking, teeth snapping instinctively at the air. Dr. Bennett rushed forward, hands shaking but precise. "Mark, I need to get to the device. If I don't remove it, he could." His words were cut off as Ranger let out a sharp yelp, and the intruder lunged toward him. Mark fired a warning shot, and the bullet ricocheted off the wall, sending sparks flying. The intruder swore and backed off, eyes narrowing with deadly intent. But in that moment of distraction, Ranger, weak yet unstoppable, twisted his body and lunged forward. Despite trembling legs, he sank his teeth into the attacker's forearm, forcing him to stagger back. Mark seized the opportunity. "Go now," he shouted at Dr. Bennett, who moved toward the tray, tools clutched in trembling hands. Ranger growled low, guarding Lily, muscles taut despite the poison and trauma. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder, closer. Backup had arrived, but the intruders knew every second counted. They weren't just after Ranger anymore. They were here for revenge, for power, and for fear. The intruders regrouped at the doorway. One of them reached for the micro-tracker Ranger had dislodged. But Ranger, summoned by instinct, weakly leapt toward it, growling ferociously. The device beeped violently as his body convulsed. Every movement risked triggering whatever mechanism remained, yet Ranger's focus never wavered. Mark pressed Lily behind a heavy exam table, heart hammering. "Hold on, baby. He's not done fighting," he whispered, voice tight. Lily's fingers dug into Ranger's fur, eyes wide with terror and hope. Dr. Bennett worked quickly, hands steady despite shaking. The tiny device resisted, embedded deeper than expected, but he cut pride and finally freedom. Ranger stiffened as the tracker was removed, his body writhing violently, but the beeping stopped. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the ragged breathing of a small girl and a hero dog. The intruders froze, realizing their advantage had been lost. Mark's pistol trained on them, muscles tense. "It's over," he said, voice hard, unwavering. But they weren't done. The lead man's lips curled into a sinister grin. "You think this ends with a little device?" he hissed. "We know everything about you, your routines, your family, your weaknesses. You're not safe yet." Ranger barked, weak but resolute, snapping at the air, refusing to back down. Lily clutched his neck, whispering, "You're brave, you're so brave." Mark's mind raced. Backup would be inside any second, but until then every second was a gamble with lives on the line. The intruders advanced, calculating, silent, but Ranger's growl filled the space like thunder, a warning none of them could ignore. Suddenly the lights flickered on. Shadows of uniformed officers appeared at the entrance, guns raised, shouting commands. The intruders froze. Ranger, sensing the change, barked one final, defiant bark, forcing the lead man to stumble back in panic. Mark grabbed Lily, holding her close. Ranger collapsed slightly under the strain, body trembling but alive, his amber eyes still blazing with life. The intruders realized they were surrounded, sirens wailing, voices commanding, their plan unraveling. One of them cursed, lunging for the door, but the officers were already moving, tackling them to the floor with precision and force. Ranger whined softly, muscles relaxing slightly, chest heaving. Lily kissed his head, tears streaking her cheeks. "You're okay, Ranger, you're okay," she whispered. Mark knelt beside them, hand on Ranger's side, feeling the faint thump of life against his palm. "You did it, boy, you made it," he murmured, but even as relief washed over him, he knew the danger wasn't fully gone. Because in the shadows, the leader of the ring had already vanished, silent, calculating, waiting. Mark's heart clenched. They had won the battle, but the war, that was far from over. And Ranger, despite every obstacle, had survived to face it. The echoes of sirens filled the clinic, bouncing off the walls like a distant storm. Mark Talbot held Lily close, her small body trembling against his chest. Ranger lay on the steel table, chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths, amber eyes flicking between his daughter and Mark, a silent promise of survival. Dr. Bennett and the medical team worked with meticulous precision, monitoring Ranger's vitals. The micro-tracker had been removed, but the damage from the toxin and stress still lingered. Mark pressed a hand to Ranger's side, feeling the faint, irregular thump of life beneath his fingers. Relief mixed with exhaustion, but it was tinged with an acute awareness that danger still lurked beyond the clinic walls. Outside, uniformed officers secured the perimeter. The intruders had been apprehended, or at least some of them. The leader, the one Mark knew had orchestrated the attack, had vanished into the night. The battle was far from over, but at least for now, Ranger was alive. Lily whispered into Ranger's fur, voice barely audible, "You're okay, you're really okay." Her tiny hands stroked the dog's trembling head. Ranger nudged her gently with his nose, letting out a weak but affectionate growl. Despite everything, he was still her protector, still her hero. Mark knelt beside them, voice rough with emotion. "You fought so hard, boy, I don't know what I'd do without you." He glanced at Dr. Bennett, whose eyes were tired but bright with cautious optimism. "He's strong," Bennett said, adjusting Ranger's IV line. "Physically, yes, but it's his spirit that's remarkable. That bond between him and your daughter, it's keeping him alive. It's extraordinary." Mark nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. "I've seen a lot in my career, but nothing like this. He's not just a K-9, he's family." Outside, officers radioed updates. The intruders had left traces of evidence behind, plans, devices, and files linking them to a violent drug ring. The authorities would take it from here, ensuring the men who had targeted Ranger and his family would face justice. But Mark knew better than to assume the danger was completely gone. Ranger shivered, legs weak, and Mark gently helped him off the table, guiding him to the floor. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, clinging as if she could somehow hold him together. Ranger leaned into her embrace, tail giving a faint, exhausted wag. "You're alive," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You stayed with me." Mark pressed a hand to her shoulder. "He's a fighter, baby. He always has been, and he always will be." Dr. Bennett smiled softly. "With care, rest, and time, he'll recover fully. The toxin is out of his system, and his vitals are stabilizing. He's going to live." Relief flooded Mark, but he knew he couldn't let his guard down. The threat wasn't completely gone. The leader of the ring was still out there, and the world was full of people who underestimated the bond between a child and her dog. Yet at this moment, all that mattered was the warmth beneath his hands, the living, breathing proof of courage and love. Lily kissed Ranger's muzzle, whispering, "I love you, boy, you're my hero." Ranger nudged her gently, tail wagging faintly, eyes shimmering with a mix of exhaustion and pride. Mark crouched beside them, voice quiet but steady. "We made it through tonight, together. Nothing can break us." For a long moment the clinic was silent, but for Ranger's gentle panting and the faint hum of monitors. The darkness of fear and danger had passed, leaving a fragile peace. Mark held Lily, both of them watching Ranger, who had defied death, defied danger, and had returned to them stronger in spirit than ever. Then outside a shadow shifted. Mark stiffened, eyes narrowing. The leader's absence was deliberate. He was out there, watching, planning. But this time Ranger had lived through the impossible, and Mark knew one undeniable truth. No one would ever break them. Ranger lifted his head slightly, amber eyes meeting Mark's and Lily's, full of trust, courage, and unspoken promises. He had survived the poison, the device, and the darkness, and now, in the quiet aftermath, the bond that had saved him, and all of them, was unshakable. Mark whispered, voice thick with emotion, "Welcome back, partner. Welcome back, Ranger." Lily hugged him tight, her small arms trembling with relief. Ranger leaned into her embrace, tail wagging weakly but steadily. The nightmare had ended, but the story of courage, love, and unbreakable loyalty would live forever. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the clinic, the world learned a lesson. Some bonds are stronger than fear, stronger than danger, and sometimes the smallest heroes leave the biggest marks.